Technic Ram Rebel TRX. It is built at a 1 to 8.3 scale and is a very functional version of Ram's new high-speed desert off-road truck. Here. He's here, two up there, there, on the hood scoop, and in the tail lights. We've got the Ram script on the tailgate, 702 horsepower rig license plate, trailer hitch here that's fully removable, and leaves a nice socket, big chrome exhaust pipes, the massive fender flares of the original truck, a toolbox in the bed, badges and door handles, another fender flare, and we have the Ram word up here as well, and the hood scoop and vents on the hood. The truck here, see we've got big front seats, the rear bench, center console here. This is a working Lego compass here. It doesn't actually work in this truck because it's deflected by the magnetic fields from the motors, but it's still a nice touch, I think. Center console can open up to reveal the manometer that tells you how much air pressure is in the pneumatic system. Up here we've got the shifter, some more cup holders, the touch screen. Over here we have an opening glove box. And here we have a steering wheel. It's tilt adjustable and works when the steering goes. And the seats have these little knobs at the back, the front seats, so I can slide it forward and backward using a worm gear. Can move pretty far. And then if I use the other knob, I can tilt the seat. And sliding it back. Be folded down to make room for more storage. Pneumatic suspension. So in the front it's got a double wishbone independent setup using long V2 cylinders. Well, in the rear it has a 5-link live axle using medium cylinders. So I can press down. It's quite firm, especially in the back. And in the front it doesn't rebound quite as much, but it's got a fair bit of travel, and the pneumatics help it to act more as if it's damped. Front suspension is a double wishbone design, and I also added this link here to control the forward and backward wiggling, which happened a lot because of the very long arms for the long travel suspension. It's also got a bunch of angles, so there's a caster angle between the steering pivots up there and down here. It's tilted on an angle kind of like that. And this way it's got the kingpin inclination of the steering axis, so it's an angle kind of like this. And it's also got a little bit of camber. I intended for it to be negative camber, like most vehicles, but I think in practice it turned out to be positive, which is unfortunate. Now, there's also Ackerman steering geometry, with the links being farther out because the rack is forwards, so that the line between this pivot and the pivots here points towards the center of the rear axle, more or less. Bar you can see back here, which connects there and then runs along to the other side, where there's the other one. I think you can see it right in the center there. So there's also an anti-roll bar disconnect function, but I'll get to that later. I've got a 5-link solid axle, so I've got 2 links over here, and 2 mirroring that on the other side, and then the panhard rod over there. So that controls the side-to-side wiggle. You can see I've got the differential cover on here, which was an idea I came across in other people's models that I thought looked quite nice. There aren't any angles on the rear axle, because in real life, it's unsteered, so you can't have Ackerman geometry, kingpin inclination, or caster angle. And being a solid axle, it would be extremely challenging to add camber, so I don't think it's ever done in real life. So I've also got an anti-roll bar back here, in the same location as the real Ram, curving around the differential, and mounting up at the top. So that axle is forced to twist when one side goes up. manually, as well as electronically. The electronic will be shown later, but right now you can just get an idea for what's under the hood. We've got motors, a battery over here, the engine, some miscellaneous other motors. This is what the truck looks like with it open. Electronic functions can be split into 4 main groups. They're all powered from this camera battery in here, which is inside my powered up hub. So that first it powers the hub itself, which controls 3 functions: drive, shifting, and steering. And it also runs to my 3 power functions infrared receivers at the back, which power 6 additional remote controlled functions. And then it also controls the L motor that runs the distribution gearbox through this switch here. And finally there's the functions that are always on, which would be like the lights, the compressor, and normally they're the M motor that would be running this engine constantly. I have it disengaged right now, just because it would be very irritating while I'm videoing, but normally that would be always on. I've got a RC buggy motor down here, one of the Chinese versions. It's running a single pneumatic compressor there down here at high speeds. You can see it running here. It's controlled from this switch here, which is a pneumatic auto valve. Unfortunately, I didn't synchronize it that great, so it stops at a very low pressure, but you can still manually control it by pressing it against the cylinders. And in addition, there's a manual pump back here, so you pull out this axle, then it rises up and sticks out here, and then you can pump it manually. The axle's in there because it wouldn't look very good sticking out of the hood, it just keeps it in the down position. Is the rear window here, which can slide that way using a long, thin pneumatic cylinder under the roof. Controlled from my general control panel back here, so if I flip the valve, you see it slides out, and back in. Takes quite a bit of pressure to work though. Not sure if I'll get any more cycles out of my air tank. And I noticed that as this happens, my suspension starts to sag because it's running out of pressure. Oh dear. Function is controlled with the power functions medium motor. It's a windshield wiper system, which unfortunately does not have the sweep I was hoping for. So if you look down here, you can see we got the medium motor tucked back there. Rotates this beam, which slides this linkage back and forth, which turns universal joints, which turn the gears, which move the wipers. So you can see it moving here. I used old school 14-tooth gears here, meshing with new 12-tooth gears just to give it a slightly higher gear ratio and slightly more movement. This is the anti-roll bar disconnect. It's not very easy to see, but this motor here, not that one. Right. Yeah. So this medium motor can flip this switch back and forth, and you can see this transmission driving ring, which slides back and forth. Now instead of connecting gear, that's actually connecting parts of the anti-roll bar. So right now the two sides can move independently of each other, but now they're locked together by the driving ring. This is a feature in some real Rams. I know at least the Power Wagon version of it has it. I don't know about the TRX, but it's possible. Function is an opening hood using a Power Functions large motor. I can open it manually as well, but it's pushed up by the motor, but it's not actually connected. So the motor runs the worm gear there to a 22 gear, which then turns an 8-tooth gear, which pushes this rack up. I was very limited in my space down here, but it turned out to work fairly well. And it gave it kind of a classic Technic feel as well, which I liked. Position transfer case controlled by this medium motor, so you can see the action down here. First, this part is actually connected to the motor, so right now it would be in, I think, high range rear wheel drive, so a little bit of pulling. You see this connector move, so now it will be in 4-wheel drive, but still high range. And then as this keeps moving, it bumps into a beam, which rotates another switch, which you can't see here, that shifts it into low range. So now you can see the transfer case working. So we've got this gear connected up to the rear wheel is spinning fairly quickly. Then if I start to shift here, you'll note that this one starts to spin as well. Now it's in four-wheel drive. We go a little further, the speed transfer case gets into neutral. And then if I go a little further, it's into lowering. And then reversing the whole process. Function is controlled by a media motor tucked up here that flips the switch through a worm gear to lock or unlock the rear differential. It's in the location where a central differential might be, but because I didn't want to use the differential in here, I've actually got two shafts that run up here to the two sides of this differential. Brake system. It's driven by this motor, which goes through these bevel gears, and down to these ones here, and then it runs universal joints up front and rear to run four small linear actuators. You can see we got one here, hooked up to this brake, one hooked up to this brake, and then one on each suspension arm hooked up to these brakes. Unfortunately, there seems to be some problem in the front half that causes the motor to stall before the braking is complete. So, you can see a slight change back here, but nothing at the front. I was kind of disappointed by this, but it's so densely built up here that I don't think I can get to it to adjust or fix anything. We found that my brakes weren't working, but that the motor would just stall all the time. So I'm now halfway through disassembly, and I noticed that this universal joint here had popped out and was off to the side, and I imagine that's what was jamming it before. So now, I can flip it up. You can see the brakes working now. Now the system everywhere is going. Unfortunately, the front still doesn't seem to move, but in the back, you can very much see the effect. And I imagine these brakes would be fairly strong, because they got a linear actuator going straight onto them. Speed gearbox, which is hidden down there. You can see part of it there. It's pretty much all over the axle, but you really can't see it. It's sandwiched between a lot of other things. You might be able to get a glimpse of a wave shifter through there. Anyway, that's controlled by, I think it's, no, not that one. Yeah, that L motor here, there should be another one on top of it, yeah. This one here, I think. It runs the worm gear, which shifts it. So it's set up with the programming and the powered up app, so I can either shift through it sequentially with the controller, or it can also, I tried to program it to shift automatically. I doubt it works that well, though. So I'm going to be running through the gears now, so you can watch this gear and the speed it's in. Right now it's, well, yeah, it should be in first now, so running the motor, it's in first gear, shift to second, shift to third, fourth, to fifth, to sixth, to seventh, and finally to eighth. So if you look down here, you'll be able to see some of the shifting process. And if you look through, nah, you won't be able to catch any of that. Also, I have it programmed so if I press the stop button, it'll automatically shift back down to first before stopping. And then the program ends. I'll now try to demonstrate the automatic shifting capability of this truck. So if you look here at my controller, that there is the speed indicator. So right now it's in first gear. This here can shift between manual and automatic mode, which is shown by the color of the light. Red is automatic, and green is manual. These buttons here allow me to shift in manual mode. This is steering, and this is drive. So I'm going to be driving it, hopefully the same speed the whole time, and we'll be watching it shift. So it starts out in first, it's measuring the speed, and it discovered it's pretty easy. So it shifts up to second, 2 seconds later it shifts up to third, and then it shifts up to 4. And because it's not under any load right now, it'll keep going all the way up to 8. Now it's at 6. I'm driving in reverse, by the way, just because it's more convenient for my hand. So now, I'm going to start putting stress on that 28-piece gear with my finger. So you can watch how the speed and gears are related. Been going slow for a long time, it hops down to 7. Now I release my finger, and it goes back up to 8. Downshift from 8ths to 7ths. I have tried it myself, and I've gotten it to shift quite a bit lower than that. However, I really can't do it on video because I've got my one hand controlling the throttle on the controller, one hand holding the camera, and I've only got one finger to spare in stressing the gears, and I couldn't, with that one finger, I couldn't put on enough stress to get it below 7ths. The truck is driven by 2 powered-up extra-large motors below there and there, and I've also finally reconnected the medium motor that runs the engine. This is actually driven by the drive motors as well through a differential for an adder, so if I run the drive motors, it'll rev up. Right now it's in first gear low range, so you can see it driving very slowly. Now second gear, and up to third, and the suspension is fading. So now it's looking really weird, but it's still driving admirably. Until something sounds like it broke. In fourth gear, in fifth gear, still low range. Not very happy about moving, but it's still doing it. Seems that the truck is unwilling to go above 5th gear in low range. Steering is accomplished using another powered-up large motor. And the steering wheel up here works. And there's Ackerman geometry and the other angle that I talked about earlier with the suspension. Controlled through this 6-function distribution gearbox and switch back here. Opening doors with the moving running board. So when I start it running, both of these doors will open, and this thing of beams here will slide out. So you can see this has slid out to make a step to get into the cabin, and the doors are now open. There's also the exact same system on the other side, but there's not really any point showing it because it's exactly the same. The opening of the tailgate in the barn door fashion, like that. Now this function has problems. I didn't gear it low enough apparently, so it requires a lot of help, and it also tends to skip out of gear. So I'm going to turn on the motor and just kind of try to coax it into gear while pushing the tailgate open. And you can see it's moving a bit. Manipulation, I managed to get the tailgate shut, so now I can display it folding down like a normal tailgate. And then coming back up. I also built a trailer with a quad bike that it can tow. So the quad bike itself is modeled after the Suzuki LT500R quad bike, which packed a 500cc two-stroke engine into a rather small bike to make an extremely fast quad bike. I don't really know much about quad bikes, but it seemed to be an interesting one to model. So mine has a purple and lime green color scheme, which was rather challenging to make because I do not have many of those parts, but it seemed to work out well. It's got a buggy motor in the back for rear-wheel drive, and a swing axle suspension. I'm using these flex axle parts here to prevent the wheels from sliding off. I've got the 5.5 long axles with stops here to prevent it from pulling out. And around on the front, I've got independent double wishbone suspension, and I've got steering using this servo motor, and the steering wheel, and the forks also turn when it steers. Steering and drive. Fun to drive with quite a bit of power, but unfortunately my V2 receiver is broken, so it'll cut power once in a while when it's under high stress. And it's got low ground clearance, so it gets stuck. And it works better downhill, for sure. Modeled after any particular system, and it's got not a whole lot of aesthetic. It also is connected by these two universal joints to the truck, and the last two functions of the distribution gearbox go to the trailer. So with this, the trailer can now stand up on its own. Put the quad bike on. Trailer. Here we've got the landing legs that can be deployed with a worm gear. And then we have these long ramps that are driven through these rubber tires here, also from the truck. These weighted bricks here just help to balance it when the quad bike is on it, because it tends to be a little rear heavy then. You can also see I have these flex axles on here to give it a simple live axle suspension like many utility trailers have. Yeah, that one got a little loose, just needed a pinch to keep going. Same with this one here. A little steep, but it fits with the wheels on the quad, so you can imagine it driving down and up. That one went happily. This one takes a little more coaxing, I guess. It's unfortunate that they aren't synchronized. I am pleased with this model. I think it looks okay, and the functions, well, I managed to fit a lot of functions into it, which was fun. I was able to put a lot more in because it was such a big model. It was also interesting to combine the power functions, powered up, and distribution gearbox features all in one truck, and I also appreciated adding the trailer and quad bike, which I think was an interesting touch.